it actually indicates the state of the intellectual discourse in the ANC. Clearly, it's the ANC has a poverty of ideas. In the context of the minister blamed the constitution for the ANC's lack of delivery, rather than taking responsibility. I mean, the ANC has been in power for 30, now for close to 30 years. That's 2 generations. And there is no responsibility. So it does show an intellectual poverty to blame the constitution and to blame other black South Africans who are critical of the ANC. I know the minister calls them colonial or Western mental deficit people. If you're black and you criticize a black government, which does show a really intellectual discourse deficit.
Then it raises the question of accountability. Who is to blame when politicians fail? Because it really just speaks to how the Constitution, the debate around the Constitution needs to now be engaged, even if politicians misuse it.
Of course, what Minister Sisulu said was not her first time. I mean, that really was, that argument of the Constitution, or even blaming the CODESA negotiations and compromises for the current state of South Africa hasn't, she's not the first who brought it up. I mean, that's been the Jacob Zuma president, and that is presidency. It happened during his presidency. And particularly also, populist politicians in South Africa who are not very honest, they use that. So I think the most important thing that we, to take from here is, if you're a minister, and Minister Sisulu has been a minister since 1994, if you're unhappy with, the constitutions, and you should not be in the government, you should resign on principle. So that also means there's some intellectual dishonesty. And then also, the second thing is, as the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, if someone is in your executive and someone attack the rules of the game of the country and the values and the system, you also need to fire that person.
And in that sentence alone, Professor Gumede, looking at what the Sunday papers have to say this morning, Ramaphosa's silence in the aftermath of the opinion piece, the Sunday Times says, as pressure mounts to axe Sisulu, ANC insiders fear the move could jeopardize Ramaphosa's chances of a second term when the party holds its national conference in December. And the Sunday will say that Sisulu is taking a page out of former President Jacob Zuma's playbook as she takes on the president. According to ANC insiders, that's in accordance to the Sunday World, Minister Sisulu is essentially daring the president to fire her.
I think what is happening here, this is the opening salvo of the ANC's, leadership battle. In December, the ANC is having its national elective conference. The President Ramaphosa is seeking a re-election as the leader of the ANC. And I think Lindiwe Sisulu has now thrown her hat into the ring, but she's gone the populist route. So she's gone the route of Ramaphosa's opponents. She's mobilizing for their support. The former President Jacob Zuma supporters, former ANC General Secretary Ismail Masule's supporters, they are now known as the Radical Economic Transformation faction. So she is mobilizing and she's pitching for them, to get them to vote her in as the president of the ANC. So that's what's happening now. And then President Ramaphosa, his strategy is to what he calls a unity strategy, to hold the ANC together, to unite it. And he hopes by uniting it, it means keeping even those who criticize, keeping those who are corrupt, keeping those who are incompetent inside the ANC rather than firing him. Now, that is the problem of that kind of strategy, is that strategy is against the country's interests. So Ramaphosa may actually, the irony of such a strategy is that it would mean keeping corrupt people, keeping incompetent people, not firing people like Lindiwe Sisulu, and then it will create a paralysis in his own government because people lose the credibility in the president himself for not doing the obvious. So he doesn't have power, although he is the president, because he's not doing the obvious. So for the sake of the unity of the ANC, President Ramaphosa is actually undermining the credibility of the ANC also, and also the electoral credibility of the ANC.
This really speaks to how the battle lines have essentially been drawn ahead of December, and the tone has been set. Should we expect more when it comes to the aggression and the strategies? Because we understand, according to the papers, that Minister Sisulu is planning to meet with former President Jacob Zuma and suspended ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule to essentially become the face of the RET.
I think, this is just the beginning. So I think South Africans will have to prepare themselves for really possibly the biggest political battle in the ANC, even bigger than previous political leadership battles, because, there's something, the ANC last year at the local government elections, lost the local government elections. That's the first time that has ever happened. We've got the biggest economic crisis since the Second World War in South Africa because of COVID. So, everything has changed in the country. Now, this crisis in the ANC, despite the fact that we've got an economic crisis, unemployment, poverty, and so on, the ANC is so focused on this leadership struggle that it's very unlikely that we're going to see any delivery, public service delivery. There's not going to be any priority focusing on public service delivery, dealing with corruption, dealing with crime, because the ANC is going to be so focused on this leadership battle of the party. And that is, I think, the sad part for ordinary ANC voters, all the ANC supporters, and for South Africans who are not ANC supporters. So the ANC has become looking inwards, fighting inwards, instead of actually renewing itself. And even if renewing means that the ANC breaks up, the corrupt people leave, and the ANC remains only with the honest people. So I think we have to gear up for a period of instability in the ANC where we're not going to see public service delivery. And that, unfortunately, is the reality.
You speak about renewal. You speak about President Cyril Ramaphosa and his unity strategy. But looking at the build-up to the elections, can we say that there are credible presidential candidates, especially looking at this opinion piece and the sort of tone it sets ahead of elections?
I think the good thing for President Cyril Ramaphosa is there are no credible candidates. If you look, I mean, as I said, this sort of intellectual discourse, which is dishonest, which blames the Constitution, which blames other black people who are critical of corrupt black people as the problem for the lack of delivery in South Africa. I mean, that really doesn't make sense. So if that is the face of the opposition to Cyril Ramaphosa, really, then Cyril Ramaphosa has almost no competition. So I think right now,